I'm standing in the same coffee shop where it all began, 3 years later, holding the same ceramic mug I always ordered. The barista behind the counter is different now, younger with purple streaks in her hair and a nose ring that catches the afternoon light. She doesn't know my order by heart the way Christina Baker used to. Christina, who would start making my double-shot cortado the moment she saw me walking up the street, who would slide it across the counter with that knowing smile that said she understood I needed caffeine more than conversation most mornings. The corner table by the window is empty today. It's the same table where I first saw him, where everything changed without me even realizing it was changing. I can still see the ghost of that moment, the way the November sunlight fell across his face as he looked up from his laptop, the way his smile seemed to light up something inside my chest that I didn't even know had gone dark. His name was Nathan Hughes, though I didn't learn that until weeks later. At first, he was just the guy with the infectious laugh who always seemed to be working on something important, fingers flying across his keyboard with the kind of focused energy I envied. He had this way of existing in space that made everything around him seem more vivid, more alive. Even now, standing here in this familiar place that holds so many memories, I can feel the echo of what it was like to be in his presence. I want to ask you something. If you're watching this from wherever you are in the world, drop a comment and let me know what city, what country you're watching from. And if this story is hitting you in the chest the way it's hitting me to tell it, hit that hype button. I know it sounds silly, but it actually helps more people find these stories. And maybe someone else needs to hear this too. Maybe someone else is standing in their own coffee shop, holding their own memories, wondering if they're brave enough to face what they've been running from. The first time I saw Nathan, I was running late for a client meeting. I'd overslept after staying up too late working on a presentation that felt like it might make or break my career at the marketing firm where I'd been grinding away for 2 years. I was that guy, the one who showed up first and left last, who said yes to every project and no to every invitation, who had convinced himself that success meant never having time for anything that mattered. I burst through the coffee shop door with my usual frantic energy, already rehearsing my apologies to Christina for being in such a rush, when I heard it. This laugh, warm and genuine and completely unguarded, coming from the corner by the window. It stopped me in my tracks, literally. I stood there in the doorway like an idiot, briefcase in one hand, phone in the other, completely frozen by the sound of someone enjoying themselves without reservation. That's when I saw him. Nathan was sitting with another guy, someone I didn't recognize, and they were both leaning back in their chairs with the easy comfort of old friends. Nathan had his head tilted back, eyes crinkled at the corners, and when he straightened up and caught me staring, his smile didn't fade. Instead, it seemed to widen, like he was including me in whatever joke had made him laugh in the first place. I should have looked away. I should have walked to the counter, ordered my coffee, and rushed off to my meeting like I always did. Instead, I found myself smiling back, this stupid, involuntary grin that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than politeness. For maybe 3 seconds, we just looked at each other across that small space, and I felt something shift inside me, something I couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. The moment broke when Christina called my name from behind the counter. She was already holding my cortado, steam rising from the cup in delicate spirals, and her expression was somewhere between amused and concerned. I'd been coming to this place almost every day for 6 months, and she'd never seen me just stand in the doorway smiling at nothing. "Earth to Ethan Powell," she said, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks as I realized I'd been completely obvious in my staring. "Your usual, and you're cutting it close for that meeting you mentioned yesterday." I walked to the counter on unsteady legs, hyper-aware that Nathan might still be watching, though I didn't dare turn around to check. Christina handed me the coffee with a knowing look that made me want to disappear through the floor. "Thanks," I mumbled, fumbling for my wallet. "I should go." "Should you?" she asked, and there was something in her voice that made me look up. Christina had always been perceptive, one of those people who seemed to see straight through whatever front you were putting up. She was older than me by maybe 10 years, with silver threading through her dark hair and laugh lines that spoke of someone who'd lived enough life to recognize when someone else was avoiding theirs. "My meeting," I said weakly. Starts at 10, right? It's 9:15. She nodded toward the corner table. Plenty of time for a conversation. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I didn't know what she was talking about, that I wasn't the kind of person who struck up conversations with strangers in coffee shops. But the words stuck in my throat because even as I was thinking them, I could feel Nathan's presence behind me like a physical weight. I could hear him talking to his friend, something about a project deadline and creative differences, and his voice had this quality that made me want to keep listening. I don't, I started, then stopped. What was I even trying to say? That I didn't talk to people? That I didn't have time for whatever Christina was suggesting? That I was perfectly content with my carefully ordered life where I knew exactly what to expect from every day? Ethan, Christina said gently, and the way she said my name made me realize she'd been watching me for months, probably seeing things I hadn't even admitted to myself. When's the last time you did something, Coros, just because you wanted to? The question hit me like cold water. I stood there, coffee growing cool in my hands, trying to remember. When had I last made a choice based on desire rather than obligation? When had I last allowed myself to want something without immediately calculating the risks and benefits? I turned around before I could talk myself out of it. Nathan was still sitting with his friend, but now he was looking directly at me, like he'd been waiting to see if I'd have the courage to turn around. His smile was smaller now, more tentative, but it was still there. His friend followed Nathan's gaze and said something I couldn't hear, then gathered his things with the efficient movements of someone who recognized a cue to leave. Nathan said something back, and they both laughed, but it was different from the laugh that had stopped me in the doorway. This one was nervous, anticipatory. Go, Christina said behind me, before you think yourself out of it. I walked across the coffee shop on legs that felt disconnected from my body. Nathan's friend was standing now, pulling on a jacket that looked expensive and well-tailored. He was older than Nathan, maybe 40, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested he was used to being the smartest person in the room. Nathan, I'll call you later about the Morrison account, he said, then looked at me with frank curiosity. Good luck with your presentation. It took me a second to realize he was talking to me, and another second to wonder how he knew about my meeting. Nathan must have seen the confusion on my face because he laughed, that same warm sound that had stopped me at the door. Robert Rodriguez, Nathan said, gesturing to his friend. He has supernatural hearing and an unhealthy interest in other people's conversations. Robert, this is Ethan. Ethan. Robert. Robert extended his hand with a grin that suggested he was enjoying himself immensely. The guy who comes in here every morning at exactly 8:45 and orders the same drink from the same barista and sits at the same table by the door. I felt my face burn. You've been watching me? Hard not to, Robert said. You have very distinctive habits. Also, Nathan here has been trying to work up the courage to talk to you for about 2 months. Robert, Nathan said, and there was a warning in his voice that made me look at him more closely. He was blushing now, a faint pink that started at his collar and worked its way up his neck. It made him look younger, more vulnerable, and something in my chest tightened in response. What? It's true. Robert was clearly enjoying Nathan's discomfort. Every morning, same routine. There's that guy again. I should say something. Maybe tomorrow. It's been like watching the world's most polite stalker. I wasn't stalking, Nathan said quickly, looking at me with something that might have been panic. You seemed like you were always in a hurry and I didn't want to bother you. The honesty in his voice did something to me. Here was this man who had been thinking about me, noticing me, wanting to talk to me, and I'd been so wrapped up in my own carefully controlled world that I'd missed it entirely. How many mornings had we been in the same space, breathing the same air, existing in parallel without connecting? You wouldn't have been bothering me, I heard myself say, and the words felt foreign in my mouth. When was the last time I'd admitted to wanting something, especially something as simple and complicated as conversation with a stranger? Robert clapped his hands together once, a sharp sound that made both Nathan and me jump. Perfect. My work here is done. He gathered his briefcase and headed for the door, pausing just long enough to call back. Nathan, remember what we talked about. Sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as the scariest ones. And then he was gone, leaving Nathan and me standing by the table in a silence that felt charged with possibility. I realized I was still holding my coffee and it had gone completely cold. "Do you want to sit?" Nathan asked, and his voice was softer now, less confident than it had been when Robert was there to provide a buffer. "I mean, if you have time before your meeting." I looked at my watch, 9:25. I had plenty of time, more than enough to walk the 4 blocks to my client's office and still arrive early. But sitting down felt like crossing a line I hadn't known existed, stepping from the safe territory of routine into something unmapped and uncertain. "Sure," I said, and settled into the chair Robert had vacated. It was still warm. Nathan closed his laptop and pushed it to one side, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Up close, I could see details I'd missed from across the room. He had green eyes with gold flecks that caught the light and a small scar through his left eyebrow that looked like it had a story behind it. His hands, resting on the table between us, were long-fingered and graceful, with ink stains on his right index finger that suggested he still wrote things by hand sometimes. "So," he said, and then seemed to run out of words. "So," I echoed, and we both laughed at the same time. It broke something open between us, some invisible barrier that had been holding us in our respective corners of politeness. "I'm Nathan," he said, extending his hand across the table. "Nathan Hughes. And before you ask, yes, Robert was telling the truth. I have been wanting to talk to you for months." I took his hand, and the contact sent a jolt through me that I felt all the way to my toes. His palm was warm and slightly rough, like he worked with his hands sometimes, and he held on just a second, longer than strictly necessary. "Ethan Powell," I said, "and I have to admit, I never noticed you noticing me." "Really?" He looked genuinely surprised. I thought I was being pretty obvious. "Christina certainly noticed. She's been giving me encouraging looks for weeks." I glanced toward the counter where Christina was pretending to be busy with inventory while clearly eavesdropping on our conversation. When she caught me looking, she gave me a thumbs up that was about as subtle as a neon sign. "She's not exactly known for her discretion," I said. "Good thing," Nathan said. "Otherwise, we might have spent the next 6 months doing this elaborate dance around each other without ever actually talking." The word dance hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I was ready to examine. But there was something about the way Nathan said it, casual and matter-of-fact, that made it feel less dangerous than it should have. "What kind of work do you do?" I asked, partly because I was genuinely curious and partly because I needed to steer the conversation towards safer ground. "I see you in here with your laptop a lot, but I could never figure out what you were working on." Nathan's face lit up in a way that told me I'd hit on something he was passionate about. "I'm a freelance graphic designer, mostly working with small businesses and nonprofits. The laptop is usually full of logo concepts and website mock-ups and the occasional existential crisis about whether I'm actually any good at this." "The existential crisis part sounds familiar," I said, thinking about my own relationship with my career. "I'm in marketing, and some days I'm not sure if I'm helping my clients communicate better or just adding to the noise." "What kind of marketing?" "Digital mostly, social media campaigns, content strategy, analytics that tell you more about people's browsing habits than they probably want to know." I paused, realizing how cynical I sounded. "It pays well, and I'm good at it, but sometimes I wonder if I'm actually making anything better." Nathan nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. "Robert, the guy who was just here, he's always telling me that work should be about more than just paying the bills. That if you're not excited to wake up and do what you do, you're wasting your life." "Easy for him to say," I said, and then immediately felt bad for the edge in my voice. "Sorry, I don't know anything about his situation. It's just, not everyone has the luxury of following their passion." "No, you're right," Nathan said quickly. "Robert's in a different position than most people. He owns his own consulting firm, makes more money than he knows what to do with, doesn't have student loans or family obligations, or any of the things that make idealism feel like a luxury." There was something in the way he said family obligations that made me look at him more closely. His expression had shifted, become more guarded, and I got the sense that I'd touched on something complicated. "What about you?" I asked. "Do you have family obligations?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in slow circles on the table. "My parents," he said finally. "They're not exactly supportive of my career choices, or most of my life choices, if I'm being honest." The careful way he said it told me there was more to the story, layers of meaning I wasn't privy to yet. But I recognized the tone, the way someone sounds when they're talking around something they're not ready to say directly. I'd heard it in my own voice often enough. "That must be difficult," I said, and I meant it. I thought about my own parents, who had been nothing but supportive when I'd changed majors twice in college and then spent 6 months after graduation working at a bookstore while I figured out what I actually wanted to do with my life. I'd taken their support for granted, never really considering what it would be like to have to justify your choices to people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. "It is," Nathan said simply, "but I'm working on caring less about what they think." Robert's helping me with that, actually. He's been like a mentor, I guess, showing me that it's possible to build a life that actually fits who you are instead of who other people think you should be. I looked at my watch again. 9:40. I should be leaving soon, but the thought of walking away from this conversation felt almost physically painful. When was the last time I talked to someone who seemed to understand the weight of trying to live up to other people's expectations? "I should probably head to my meeting," I said reluctantly. But this was really nice. I'm glad Robert forced us to talk to each other." Nathan's smile was warm and a little sad. "Me too. Maybe we could do it again sometime. I mean, we're both here most mornings anyway." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it more than I'd meant anything in a long time. I stood up, gathering my briefcase and my cold coffee, and Nathan stood too. "Good luck with your presentation," he said. "Thanks." I started to walk away, then turned back. "Nathan, what Robert said about opportunities coming disguised as scary things? I think he might be onto something." Nathan's smile could have powered the whole coffee shop. "I hope so, Ethan. I really hope so." I walked to my meeting in a daze, my mind replaying every moment of our conversation. The way Nathan had looked at me when he talked about his parents, like he was sharing something precious and fragile. The way he'd said my name like he'd been practicing it. The way his hand had felt in mine, warm and solid and right. The presentation went better than I'd expected. Maybe because I was still riding the high of connection, of having stepped outside my comfort zone and found something worth the risk. My client loved the campaign concepts, approved the budget without question, and offered me a bonus that would cover my rent for the next 2 months. But all I could think about was getting back to the coffee shop the next morning, seeing if Nathan would be there, finding out if the spark I'd felt was real or just the product of too much caffeine and too little human contact. He was there the next morning, sitting at the same corner table with his laptop open and a smile that suggested he'd been waiting for me. Christina had my cortado ready before I even reached the counter, and when I looked at Nathan, he held up a second cup. "I took the liberty," he said as I approached his table. "Double shot cortado, right?" "Right," I said, settling into what was apparently becoming my chair. "Thank you." "How did the presentation go?" I told him about the client's enthusiasm, the approved budget, the bonus, and Nathan listened with the kind of attention that made me feel like what I was saying actually mattered. When I finished, he raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To successful presentations and the courage to talk to strangers in coffee shops," he said. "To persistent friends in supernatural hearing," I replied, thinking of Robert's intervention the day before. We clinked our cups together, and I felt something settle into place inside my chest, like a piece of myself I hadn't known was missing had finally found its way home. That became our routine. Every morning at 8:45, I would walk into the coffee shop to find Nathan already there, laptop open, extra coffee waiting. We would talk about work, about books we were reading, about the news, about anything and everything except the thing that was growing between us. The awareness that crackled in the air every time our hands brushed, reaching for sugar, or our knees bumped under the small table. Christina watched our careful dance with amusement and what I was beginning to recognize as maternal concern. She would refill our cups without being asked and find reasons to linger near our table, clearly invested in whatever was developing between us. "You two are adorable," she said one morning after Nathan had left for a client meeting and I was sitting alone, staring out the window at his retreating figure. "But also completely ridiculous." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew. "I mean, you're both walking around like you're afraid to breathe too hard in case you scare each other away. When are you going to ask him out?" The question hit me like cold water. Ask him out, as in on a date, as in acknowledge that what was happening between us was more than friendship, more than two people who enjoyed each other's company over morning coffee. "I don't think," I started, then stopped. What didn't I think? That Nathan was interested? That I was brave enough? That it was a good idea to complicate the best part of my day with romantic expectations? "Honey," Christina said, and her voice was gentle but firm, "I've been watching people fall in love over coffee for 15 years. I know what it looks like, and I know what happens when people are too scared to do anything about it." "What happens?" "They spend months, sometimes years, dancing around each other until one of them gets tired of waiting and moves on. And then the other one spends the rest of their life wondering what might have been if they'd just been brave enough to say what they were feeling." Her words stayed with me all day, echoing through meetings and phone calls and the endless stream of emails that filled my afternoons. That evening, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror, practicing conversations I was too scared to have. "Nathan, would you like to have dinner sometime?" "No, too formal." "Hey, want to grab a bite after coffee tomorrow?" "Too casual." "I think I'm falling for you and it's terrifying, but also the best thing that's happened to me in years." Definitely too honest. I went to bed that night with Christina's words ringing in my ears and woke up the next morning with a determination that felt fragile and precious, like something I might lose if I examined it too closely. Nathan was already at our table when I arrived, but something was different. He looked tired, stressed, and when he smiled at me, it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" I asked, settling into my chair with the coffee he'd ordered for me. "Family stuff," he said, and I could hear the weight of whatever had happened in those two words. "My parents called last night. They want to have dinner this weekend, and they're bringing someone they want me to meet." "Oh," I said, and something cold settled in my stomach. "Someone?" "The daughter of one of my father's business partners. Helen Ross. She's a lawyer, apparently very successful, very appropriate." Nathan's voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reciting facts from a textbook he had no interest in reading. "And you don't want to meet her?" Nathan looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face, something that looked like hope and fear tangled up together. "No," he said quietly, "I really don't." The silence stretched between us, heavy with all the things we weren't saying. I could feel the weight of the moment, the sense that we were standing at some kind of crossroads where the wrong word could send us spinning off in directions we couldn't control. "Why not?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I knew the answer. Nathan's hands were wrapped around his coffee cup like it was anchoring him to the table. "Because I'm not interested in dating women. I haven't been for a long time, maybe ever, but my parents refuse to accept that. They keep thinking that if they just introduce me to the right girl, I'll suddenly realize I've been confused about who I am." The words hung in the air between us, honest and vulnerable and brave, in a way that made my chest ache. Nathan was looking at me like he was waiting for me to run, to make some excuse, and leave him sitting alone at our table with his confession. Instead, I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. His skin was warm, and I could feel the slight tremor in his fingers. "That must be incredibly frustrating," I said. "It is." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Okay. The reason I wanted to talk to you all those months, the reason I was so nervous when Robert forced us to meet, the reason I look forward to these mornings more than anything else in my life." He paused, took a shaky breath. "I'm attracted to you. I have been since the first time I saw you walk through that door. And I know that might make you uncomfortable, and if it does, I understand if you need to find a different coffee shop or if you don't want to keep doing this." I stared at him, at this man who had just handed me his heart with both hands, who was sitting there waiting for me to either accept it or break it. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to tell him I was flattered, but not interested, to make some excuse about being straight or not looking for complications in my life. But I was tired of being smart and safe. I was tired of living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Nathan, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I'd intended, I need to tell you something too. He went very still, like he was holding his breath. I've never been with a man before. I've never even thought about being with a man before. But these past few weeks, sitting here with you, talking to you, I've been thinking about you. And it scares me because I don't know what it means or what I'm supposed to do with these feelings, but I know I don't want to stop having them. Nathan's smile was like sunrise, slow and warm and transformative. Really? Really? I turned my hand over so our palms were pressed together. So when your parents try to set you up with Helen Ross, you can tell them you're already seeing someone. Am I? His voice was soft, hopeful. If you want to be. Nathan lifted our joined hands and pressed a kiss to my knuckles, right there in the middle of the coffee shop where anyone could see. It was gentle and sweet and completely inappropriate, and I felt something inside me crack open like an egg, spilling warmth through my entire body. I want to be, he said against my skin. God, Ethan, I want to be so much. Christina appeared at our table as if summoned, her face bright with satisfaction. Finally, she said, refilling our cups without being asked. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in the storage room until you figured it out. You were watching? I asked, though I wasn't really surprised. Honey, everyone was watching. You two have been the best entertainment this place has had in months. She gestured around the coffee shop, and I realized that several other customers were smiling at us with varying degrees of amusement and approval. About time you did something about all that sexual tension. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but Nathan just laughed, that same warm sound that had stopped me in my tracks all those weeks ago. Thanks for the encouragement, Christina. And the privacy. Privacy is overrated, she said with a wink. Besides, love should be celebrated, not hidden. Love. The word hit me like a physical blow, not because it was wrong, but because it was so completely right. I looked at Nathan, at the way he was looking at me, and realized that what I was feeling had moved far beyond attraction or curiosity. Somewhere between morning coffees and shared conversations and the gradual lowering of our respective walls, I had fallen in love with this man. The realization should have been terrifying. A month ago, I would have run from it, convinced myself it was just confusion or loneliness or some kind of quarter-life crisis. But sitting there with Nathan's hand in mine, surrounded by the warm buzz of people who seemed genuinely happy for us, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. So, Nathan said when Christina had moved on to terrorize other customers, what happens now? I don't know, I admitted. I've never done this before. Neither have I. I mean, I've dated men before, but I've never... This is different. You're different. Different how? Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering his words. With other guys, there was always this sense that we were playing roles, you know? The confident one, the mysterious one, the guy who had his life figured out. But with you, I feel like I can just be myself, scared and hopeful and completely out of my depth. I understood exactly what he meant. With the few women I'd dated over the years, I'd always felt like I was performing some version of masculinity that didn't quite fit, trying to be the kind of man I thought they wanted rather than the person I actually was. So we figure it out together, I said. No roles, no pretending to have our lives figured out. Just us being honest about what we want. And what do you want? The question was simple, but the answer felt enormous, like it contained the potential to reshape everything about how I understood myself and my place in the world. I want to take you to dinner, I said, somewhere nice where we can talk without Christina eavesdropping. I want to hold your hand without worrying about who might see. I want to find out what it's like to kiss you. I paused, amazed by my own boldness. I want to see where this goes, Nathan. All of it. Nathan's smile was radiant. I want all of that too, tonight. Tonight. We made plans to meet at 7 at a restaurant Nathan recommended, a small Italian place in a part of town I'd never explored. I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous excitement that made it impossible to concentrate on work. I kept finding myself staring out my office window, replaying our conversation, marveling at how quickly everything had changed. At 6:30, I stood in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear on my first date with a man. Everything felt wrong, too formal or too casual, too much like I was trying too hard or not trying hard enough. Finally, I settled on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Nathan had complimented once, weeks ago. The restaurant was small and dimly lit, with candles on every table and the kind of intimate atmosphere that made conversation feel like a privilege. Nathan was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, and when he saw me, he stood up with a smile that made my knees weak. "You look good," he said, and the way he said it, like he was surprised by his own boldness, made me want to kiss him right there in front of everyone. "So do you," I replied, taking in the way his dark shirt brought out the green in his eyes, the way his hair looked like he'd run his fingers through it nervously. Dinner was a revelation. Without the familiar setting of the coffee shop, without Christina's knowing looks in the routine of morning conversation, we had to discover each other all over again. Nathan told me about growing up in a small town where being different meant being invisible, about the art teacher who had encouraged his creativity when his parents dismissed it as a waste of time. I found myself talking about my own fears, my tendency to choose safety over happiness, the way I'd been sleepwalking through my own life until he'd woken me up. "When did you know?" I asked as we shared a dessert neither of us really wanted, both of us reluctant to let the evening end. "That I was gay, or that I was interested in you?" "Both." Nathan considered this, twirling his spoon through the tiramisu. "I think I always knew I was different, but I didn't have words for it until high school. There was this guy in my English class, Michael, and I spent more time thinking about him than I did about any of the girls my friends were obsessing over. It took me a while to admit what that meant." "And me? You?" Nathan's smile was soft, remembering. "The first time I saw you, you were arguing with Christina about whether they should play holiday music in November. You were so passionate about it, so convinced that Christmas music before Thanksgiving was a crime against humanity. And I thought, I want to know what else he feels that strongly about." I remembered that conversation, remembered being genuinely annoyed by the premature holiday cheer, but I'd had no idea Nathan had been listening, had been interested enough to want to know more. "I was being ridiculous," I said. "You were being yourself. That's what made me want to talk to you." We walked back to the coffee shop together, neither of us ready to say goodnight. The street was quiet, most of the businesses closed, but the coffee shop glowed warm and inviting in the darkness. Christina had left a small light on in the window, and our corner table sat empty, waiting for tomorrow morning's continuation of whatever this was becoming. "This is where it all started," Nathan said, stopping in front of the window. "Is that what this is? A beginning?" Nathan turned to face me, and in the soft light from the window, I could see something vulnerable and hopeful in his expression. "I'd like it to be." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Ethan, can I kiss you?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibility and risk and the weight of everything we were choosing to become. I thought about all the reasons I should say no, all the ways this could complicate my carefully ordered life, all the questions I didn't have answers for yet. Then I thought about Christina's words about people who spend their lives wondering what might have been, and I knew I didn't want to be one of them. "Yes," I said, and the word came out like a prayer. Nathan's hands came up to frame my face, gentle and sure, and when his lips touched mine, it was like coming home to a place I'd never been, but had been searching for my whole life. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of us learning the shape and taste of this new territory. But when I responded, when I let myself lean into the warmth and rightness of it, Nathan deepened the kiss, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing hard, my heart racing like I'd run a marathon. Nathan rested his forehead against mine, and we stood there in the glow of the coffee shop window, holding each other up. "That was," I started, then realized I didn't have words for what it was. "Yeah," Nathan agreed, understanding perfectly. "I should probably go home," I said, though the last thing I wanted was to leave him. Probably, Nathan agreed, but he didn't step back, didn't let go of my face. Will you be here tomorrow morning? Try to keep me away. I kissed him again, quick and soft, then forced myself to step back before I lost the ability to leave it all. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Ethan. I walked home in a daze, my lips still tingling, my mind replaying every moment of the evening. When I got to my apartment, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to see if I looked different, if falling in love with a man had changed something visible about me. I looked the same, but I felt completely transformed. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too wired to sleep. I thought about Nathan's hands on my face, about the way he'd looked at me like I was something precious. I thought about tomorrow morning, about sitting across from him at our table, about all the mornings that might come after that. For the first time in my adult life, I fell asleep excited about what the future might hold. The next few weeks passed in a blur of discovery and joy. Nathan and I maintained our morning coffee routine, but now it was charged with a different kind of energy. We would sit across from each other, hands intertwined on the table, talking about everything and nothing while Christina beamed at us like a proud parent. Our evenings became a series of small adventures. Nathan showed me parts of the city I'd never explored, little galleries and bookstores and restaurants tucked away in neighborhoods I'd driven through but never really seen. I introduced him to my favorite hiking trails, and we spent Saturday mornings walking through forests that were just beginning to show their autumn colors. I was amazed by how natural it all felt, how easily Nathan fit into the spaces of my life I'd always kept carefully separate. He came to my office Christmas party and charmed my coworkers with stories about his design projects. I met his friends, a eclectic group of artists and writers and activists who welcomed me with the kind of warmth I'd never experienced in my own social circles. But even as everything between us was growing deeper and more real, there were shadows we hadn't addressed yet. Nathan's family situation loomed over us like a storm cloud, and my own fears about what this relationship meant for my future kept surfacing at unexpected moments. The first real test came 3 weeks after our first kiss, when Nathan's phone rang during one of our morning coffee sessions. He looked at the screen and his face went pale. "It's my mother," he said. "Answer it," I said, squeezing his hand. "I'll be right here." Nathan accepted the call with a shaky breath. "Hi, Mom." Even from across the table, I could hear the sharp edge in his mother's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. Nathan's expression grew more strained with each passing second. "No, I can't make it to dinner on Sunday," he said finally. "I have plans." More sharp words from the other end of the line. "With a friend," Nathan said, looking at me with an expression that was part apology, part plea for understanding. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. A friend. After everything we'd shared, everything we'd discovered together, I was still just a friend when it came to his family. Nathan ended the call a few minutes later, his hands shaking slightly as he set the phone down on the table. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." "For what?" "For calling you a friend, for not being brave enough to tell her the truth." I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I understood, that coming out to family was complicated and he should take all the time he needed. But the word friend had hit me harder than I'd expected, bringing up all my insecurities about what this relationship meant, whether Nathan was as invested in it as I was. "Are you ashamed of me?" I asked. And the words came out smaller than I'd intended. "What? No, Ethan, no, never." Nathan reached across the table, but I pulled my same hands back, suddenly needing space to think. "Then why can't you tell your mother you're seeing someone?" "Because she'll want to know who, and when I tell her it's a man, she'll lose her mind. She'll say terrible things, things I don't want you to have to hear, even secondhand." "So instead, you lie." "I'm not lying, I'm just not telling the whole truth yet." "What's the difference?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee cup like it might contain the answers he was looking for. "The difference is that I'm trying to protect both of us while I figure out how to handle this. My parents aren't like Christina or your coworkers or my friends. They're not going to be happy for us. They're going to try to destroy what we have, and I'm not ready to fight that battle yet." I understood what he was saying intellectually, but emotionally it felt like he was asking me to hide. to be his secret, to accept being relegated to the shadows of his life. How long? I asked. How long what? How long do I have to be your friend? How long before you're ready to fight that battle? Nathan looked stricken. I don't know. I wish I did, but I don't know. I stood up abruptly, needing air, needing space, needing to get away from the look of pain in Nathan's eyes that was making it hard to hold on to my anger. Ethan, please don't go. Let's talk about this. I need to think, I said, already backing toward the door. I'll call you. But I didn't call him that day or the next. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, taking on projects I didn't need to take on, anything to avoid the empty space in my chest where Nathan's presence used to be. Christina called me on the third day. Where are you? She demanded without preamble. Nathan's been sitting at your table every morning looking like someone kicked his puppy, and you're nowhere to be found. I'm working through some things. Work through them with him. Whatever happened, it's not worth throwing away the best thing that's ever happened to either of you. You don't understand the situation. I understand that you're both miserable and stubborn and too proud to pick up the phone. I understand that love is complicated and scary, and sometimes it asks you to be braver than you think you can be. And I understand that if you let fear win, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. That evening, Nathan showed up at my apartment. I heard his knock and knew immediately it was him, could somehow sense his presence through the door. I stood in my living room for a full minute debating whether to answer. When I finally opened the door, he looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed, and he was holding a cup of coffee from our shop like a peace offering. Double shot cortado, he said quietly, still warm. I took the cup, our fingers brushing in the exchange, and stepped back to let him in. He stood awkwardly in my entryway, looking around, at the apartment he'd never seen before. Nice place, he said. Nathan, I know you don't want to hear excuses or explanations, but I need to say this, okay? I need you to know that calling you my friend on the phone with my mother had nothing to do with how I feel about you and everything to do with my own cowardice. I set the coffee down on my kitchen counter and turned to face him. I'm listening. I've been thinking about what you asked, about how long you have to be my secret. And the answer is you don't. Not for one more day. Nathan pulled his phone out of his pocket. I'm going to call my mother right now, and I'm going to tell her I'm in love with a man named Ethan Powell, and if she can't accept that, then she's going to lose her son. Nathan, wait. No, I've waited long enough. I've let fear make my decisions for too long, and I almost lost you because of it. I'm not going to let that happen. He was already dialing, his hands steady now, his face set with determination. I watched him take a deep breath as the phone rang. Mom, it's Nathan. I need to tell you something. I couldn't hear his mother's response, but I could see the way Nathan's jaw tightened, the way his free hand clenched into a fist. When he spoke again, his voice was calm but firm. I'm gay, Mom. I've been gay my whole life, and I'm in love with an incredible man. His name is Ethan, and he makes me happier than I've ever been. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then I heard the sound of his mother's voice, high and sharp, though I still couldn't make out the words. Nathan's face went pale, but he didn't back down. I'm sorry you feel that way, he said, but this isn't a phase, and it's not something I'm going to change my mind about. Ethan is the person I want to build a life with, and if you can't accept that, then I guess we don't have anything more to talk about. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, staring at his phone like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done. How do you feel? I asked. Terrified, he said, and free, and like I might throw up. I crossed the room and pulled him into my arms, feeling the tension in his body, the way he was shaking slightly from adrenaline and fear, and relief all mixed together. I'm proud of you, I whispered into his hair. Are you? Even though I waited so long? Even though I hurt you? I pulled back so I could look at him, especially because you waited, because you were scared and you did it anyway, because you chose us over everything else. Nathan's smile was shaky but genuine. I choose us. Every time, Ethan. I choose us. We spent that night talking until dawn, curled up on my couch, working through all the fears and insecurities that had driven us apart. Nathan told me about his childhood, about growing up in a house where love came with conditions, about the years he'd spent trying to be someone he wasn't in order to earn his parents' approval. I told him about my own struggles with authenticity, about the way I'd built my entire adult life around other people's expectations, about how loving him had forced me to confront who I really was beneath all the careful layers of respectability. What happens now, I asked, as the sun began to rise outside my windows. Now we figure out how to build a life together, Nathan said. No more hiding, no more pretending to be just friends. We tell everyone who matters, and we let the rest of the world catch up when it's ready. Your parents might come around. Nathan's smile was sad but accepting. They might, and if they do, I'll be here. But I'm not going to put my life on hold waiting for them to decide I'm worthy of love. You are worthy of love, I said fiercely. You are worthy of all the love in the world. So are you, he replied, and kissed me with the kind of tenderness that made my chest ache with happiness. We went back to the coffee shop that morning, walking in together with our hands intertwined, no longer caring who saw or what they thought. Christina took one look at us and burst into tears. Thank God, she said, coming around the counter to hug us both. I was starting to think you two were going to be the death of me. We're sorry for worrying you, Nathan said. You're sorry for being idiots, she corrected. But you figured it out, so I forgive you. Now sit down and let me make you some coffee. We have a lot of lost time to make up for. The next few months were a whirlwind of firsts and discoveries. I met Nathan's chosen family, the friends who had supported him through his coming out process and who welcomed me with open arms. He became a fixture at my office events, charming my boss and becoming fast friends with my assistant. We moved in together after 6 months, combining our lives in ways that felt both monumental and completely natural. Nathan's parents didn't come around, at least not right away. There were a few stilted phone calls, a couple of awkward text message exchanges, but mostly there was silence. It hurt him, I could see that, but he was stronger than I'd given him credit for. He built a life that didn't require their approval, surrounded himself with people who loved him exactly as he was. My own parents were surprised but supportive in their quiet, practical way. My mother's first question was whether Nathan made me happy, and when I told her he did, she nodded like that was all the information she needed. Love is love, she said simply, and you deserve to be happy. Robert Rodriguez became an unlikely mentor to both of us, helping Nathan navigate the business side of his design work and offering me advice about finding work that felt more meaningful than just profitable. He never said, "I told you so," about pushing us together that first day, but his satisfied smiles whenever he saw us suggested he was pretty pleased with his matchmaking skills. A year after that first conversation in the coffee shop, Nathan proposed. Not with grand gestures or elaborate plans, but on a quiet Tuesday morning at our usual table, with Christina pretending not to eavesdrop from behind the counter. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket. My heart stopped. Nathan, I know we can't legally get married in this state yet, but I don't want to wait for the law to catch up in how I feel about you. He opened the box to reveal 2 simple gold bands. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours, that we're building something together that's going to last. I looked at the rings, at Nathan's hopeful face, at Christina, who was now openly crying behind the espresso machine, and felt something settle into place in my chest that I hadn't even realized was unsettled. Yes, I said, and the word came out like a sob. Yes, absolutely yes. Nathan slipped the ring onto my finger with hands that shook slightly, and I did the same for him. The gold was warm against my skin, a physical reminder of the promises we were making to each other. I love you, Nathan said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love you too, I replied, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. Christina appeared at our table with champagne she'd apparently been keeping in the back for this exact occasion, and before I knew it, the entire coffee shop was toasting our engagement. Strangers were congratulating us, other couples were sharing their own stories, and I felt surrounded by a community I'd never known I was part of. That night, we called everyone who mattered, my parents, who were thrilled, and immediately started planning a celebration dinner. Nathan's friends, who screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Robert, who claimed credit for the entire relationship and demanded to be the best man at our eventual wedding. Nathan tried calling his parents too, but the call went straight to voicemail. He left a message, his voice steady and proud, telling them about our engagement and inviting them to be part of our happiness. They never called back, but that was okay. We had each other, and we had a chosen family that loved us unconditionally, and we had a future that stretched out ahead of us, full of possibility. 2 years later, when marriage equality finally came to our state, we had a small ceremony in the coffee shop where it all began. Christina officiated, wearing a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion and crying through the entire service. My parents sat in the front row next to Robert and Nathan's best friend from art school. The other customers became our witnesses, and the barista, who had replaced Christina during her brief career as a wedding officiant, kept the coffee flowing throughout the ceremony. Nathan's parents weren't there, but their absence felt less painful than it once had. We'd built a life that was full and rich and meaningful without their approval, and while I knew Nathan still hoped they might come around someday, he'd stopped waiting for their permission to be happy. "Do you, Nathan Hughes, take Ethan Powell to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Christina asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "I do," Nathan said, and his smile was radiant. "I absolutely do. And do you, Ethan Powell, take Nathan Hughes, Dickie Hughes, to be your lawfully wedded husband?" I looked at Nathan, at this man who had changed everything about how I understood love and courage and authenticity, who had taught me that the scariest choices were often the most worthwhile ones. "I do," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. When Christina pronounced us married, the entire coffee shop erupted in cheers. Nathan kissed me with the kind of passion that should probably have been inappropriate for a public venue, but no one seemed to mind. We were surrounded by love and acceptance, and the kind of joy that comes from watching two people find their way to each other against all odds. Later, at the small reception we held in the community room above the coffee shop, Robert stood up to make a toast. "I've known Nathan for 5 years," he said, raising his glass. "And I've watched him struggle to find his place in the world, to figure out who he was and what he wanted. But I've never seen him as happy as he's been since Ethan walked into his life." He turned to me. "And Ethan, I've only known you for a couple of years, but it's been amazing to watch you come alive, to see you discover parts of yourself you didn't even know existed." Robert's expression grew more serious. "Love isn't always easy. It asks us to be vulnerable, to take risks, to choose courage over comfort. But when you find the right person, when you find someone who sees you and accepts you and challenges you to be your best self, that's when life really begins." He raised his glass higher. "To Nathan and Ethan, who had the courage to see each other, really see each other, and to build something beautiful together. May your love continue to grow and inspire everyone around you." The toast was met with applause and more tears, and as I looked around the room at all the faces beaming at us, I felt overwhelmed by gratitude. Not just for Nathan, though he was the center of it all, but for every person who had supported us, encouraged us, celebrated with us. As the evening wound down and our guests began to leave, Nathan and I found ourselves alone in the coffee shop, surrounded by the detritus of our wedding reception. Christina had insisted on cleaning up, shooing us away with instructions to go enjoy our wedding night, but we'd lingered, reluctant to leave the place where our story had begun. "Can you believe we're married?" Nathan asked, spinning his wedding ring around his finger like he was still getting used to the weight of it. "Honestly, no. A year ago, I thought I was going to spend my life alone, married to my job, wondering why I never felt satisfied with anything. And now," I looked around the coffee shop, at our corner table where we'd had so many conversations, where we'd fallen in love slowly and then all at once, where we'd learned to be brave enough to want things we'd never thought we could have. "Now I can't imagine my life without you in it," I said. "You changed everything for me, Nathan. You made me brave." "You made me brave too," he replied. "You made me believe I was worth fighting for." We stood there in the quiet coffee shop, holding each other, surrounded by the ghosts of all our mornings together, all the conversations and revelations and small moments that had built into something extraordinary. "What do you think happens next?" Nathan asked. "I don't know," I said. And for the first time in my life, That uncertainty felt like a gift rather than a threat. But I know we'll figure it out together. Together, Nathan agreed, and kissed me in the place where we'd first learned what it meant to be seen, really seen, by another person. Now, standing here 3 years later, I can still feel the echo of that kiss, the promise it contained, the way it sealed something between us that time and distance and even death couldn't break. Nathan is gone now, taken by a drunk driver on a rainy Tuesday morning 6 months ago. But the love we built together remains. I come to this coffee shop every morning still, not because I'm hoping to see him, but because this is where I learned who I was capable of being. This is where I discovered that love isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose every day, even when it's scary, even when it's hard, even when it means risking everything you thought you knew about yourself. Christina retired last year, but she still stops by sometimes. And when she sees me sitting at our old table, she always brings me a double-shot cortado without being asked. She never says anything about Nathan's absence, never offers platitudes about time healing all wounds or him being in a better place. She just sets down the coffee and squeezes my shoulder, and somehow that says everything that needs to be said. I've started writing again, something I hadn't done since college. Stories about love and loss and the courage it takes to be vulnerable with another person. My first book comes out next month, dedicated to Nathan's memory and to everyone who's ever been brave enough to love someone completely. Sometimes I think about what Robert said at our wedding, about love asking us to choose courage over comfort. Nathan and I had 3 beautiful years together, 3 years of choosing each other every day, of building a life that was authentic and meaningful and full of joy. It wasn't enough time, it will never be enough time, but it was real, and it was ours, and no one can take that away from us. I miss him every day. I miss his laugh, his terrible jokes, the way he would steal sips of my coffee when he thought I wasn't looking. I miss waking up next to him, miss the way he would hum while he cooked breakfast, miss the quiet comfort of his presence in the evening when we would read together on the couch. But I'm not sorry we found each other. I'm not sorry we took the risk, made the leap, chose love over fear, because even though it ended too soon, even though the grief sometimes feels like it might swallow me whole, I know that loving Nathan made me more myself than I'd ever been before. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what love is supposed to do, not promise us forever, but teach us how to be fully alive for whatever time we have. Nathan taught me that. He taught me to be brave, to be authentic, to choose connection over safety. I finish my coffee and gather my things, preparing to leave this sacred space and face another day without him. But as I stand up from our table, I feel something I haven't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that the pain will go away, because I don't want it to. The pain is proof of what we had, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. No, this is a different kind of hope. Hope that somewhere out there, someone else is sitting in a coffee shop, afraid to talk to the person who makes their heart race. Hope that they'll find the courage to take that first step, to risk everything for the possibility of love. Hope that they'll choose bravery over safety, authenticity over comfort, connection over isolation. Because that's what Nathan would want. He would want his story, our story, to inspire others to take the leap, to trust in the possibility of love, to believe that they deserve to be seen and known and cherished exactly as they are. I walk out of the coffee shop into the bright morning sun, carrying his memory with me like a talisman, like a reminder that love is always worth the risk. And somewhere in the distance, I can almost hear his laugh, warm and encouraging, telling me to keep going, keep loving, keep believing in the possibility of connection. We were just two strangers in a coffee shop until his smile made me forget everything else. And in forgetting, I found everything I never knew I was looking for.